the astonishing thing to me, Karen, and it turned into an incredibly sociable thing. In my mind's eye before, I thought, imagine, standing out there on the lonely crag, man recovering from grief in the howling wind, but it wasn't like that at all. I mean, of course, there was some howling wind and there was some rain and so on, but it was super, super sociable. And people came and walked with me probably on about 50% of the days, maybe even slightly more. And then, lots of very sociable evenings with the people in the Airbnbs. Hearing other people's stories, it puts your own kind of feelings into context. Instead of just focusing on your own grief, you hear other people's tragedies, other people's joys, other people's aspirations, other people's inspirations. And that was what helped me recover in the end. That was what gave me a zest for life again.
Welcome to Season 4 of the Widow Podcast. I'm Karen Sutton, the Widow Coach, and I'll be supporting you through the loss of your life partner so you can find a more positive way through your grief. Whether this is your first episode or you've been with me for a while, I want you to know you are capable of creating something meaningful after loss. And you don't have to do it alone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Widow Podcast. I am joined today by the lovely Laurence Carter. Laurence lost his wife Melitta back in 2015 and decided to take a walk around England to raise awareness about cervical cancer. Laurence then went on to write a book that he has titled From Grief to Love, Walking Around England and Wales. And it's a beautiful read. And we're going to talk about his journey, his walk, writing the book. But first of all, I just want to say a very warm welcome, Laurence. It really is lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Lovely to meet you, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, bless you. So let's start, as I always like to start on the podcast when we have guests. Tell us a little bit about Melitta. She died from cervical cancer back in 2015, hence why you wanted to raise awareness about this, which I think is incredible. And you've taught me a lot about it, and we'll go on to talk about that, in our conversation. But tell us a little bit about Melitta.
She was English. She grew up in London. I met her when she was in her mid-20s. I was a couple of years older. She was a volunteer, VSO in Malawi, and I happened to be working there, and we met there. And the day we met, she was in this beautiful yellow dress. She had dark curly hair. She had a big smile on her face. I mean, it was impossible not to fall in love with her. Really, it was. I was slayed at first sight. So we played some tennis. We went on a walk together, and 2 years later we were married. And we had 3 children, and we ended up living and working in Washington, D.C. And then one day, it was in the fall in 2012, I came home from work, and Melitta looked at me with a couple of tears in her eyes and said, "I've got bad news. I have to have an operation next week. I have cervical cancer." And she'd been to have the checkup. The checkup had told her to go to the doctor had said go to the hospital. And so the following week, she had an emergency operation, and then after that, she had radiation treatment primarily. And then the question was whether or not they had caught the cancer. And it was only a year later when we found out. I happened to be traveling on work. I was on the other side of the world, and I got a call from her, and she said, "I've got bad news. The cancer spread to my lungs. They give me 12 months to 12 months to live." And it was one of it's one of those moments in your life where you remember everything. I couldn't hold her hand. I couldn't do anything to comfort her. So I got on a plane, immediately came back. And then we had a long goodbye, the children and me, which lasted 2 years. She actually lived almost 2 years from that date. And then passed away here in the house with the 3 children who were, like, at that stage, maybe 19, 20, 22, 24. We had a couple of dogs. So she passed away just here in the living room in the house. So it was a long goodbye. She was very kind of right up until, I would say, the last 2 or 3 months. She was very kind of brave, and she was very kind of keen to make the most out of life, out of the remaining time of her life. So she was a very opinionated, kind of strong person. I think that was what attracted me to her so much. And she insisted that, we kind of, as a family, we kind of drew in as a family. We do things together. We did even a tiny bit of traveling. We do things together, and we just made the most of our remaining time. So that's how it was for that 3 years. We had a year of hope, and then 2 years of saying goodbye.
And was this picked up, Laurence, from just a routine smear that she went to
So what
initially?
happened was, she was a very kind of responsible person. So she had the smear tests about every, whatever it is, 2 to 3 years. And that particular year, she had been scheduled to have it in March, and the doctor was away for some reason. And then in the summer, we were away for like when the next date was. So it got postponed to October. And that, to be honest, that was the difference between life and death. Those 6 months. If the doctor had been there, if she'd gone in March, they would have caught it a bit earlier. That would have been stage 3. Instead, what happened? She went. It got postponed. She went 6 months later, and by the time they went she went for the test, it was stage 4. Although we didn't know that at the time. So literally 6 months, the difference between life and death.
That's a frightening story, isn't it? Actually,
Yeah.
that's
And the ironic thing, Karen, is that, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, a few years earlier, I turned 50, and she was on my case saying, you have to go and do this test and that test and colonoscopy and all sorts of things. And, I've never once did it ever cross my mind to say, Melitta, are you, have even though the doctor was away, you better hurry up and go and have that test quickly. It's really, it's important, and so on.
Mhm.
Never crossed my mind. So, if I could live my life again, I would change that immediately. So, I mean, but, I think most of us are like that. We're not thinking like these things it can be a matter of weeks that can change.
Do you think then that the smear tests are only done out sort of every, I think it's 2 to 3 years. That's quite a long time, isn't it, in between checkups?
Yes.
And a lot
Yeah.
can happen. Do you think they should be done closer together?
No, I mean, I'm not trying to. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to second guess what they say. But I think that if you get, you come to your scheduled time, then it's important to do it on the
Go.
scheduled time.
Yeah.
I guess that's
Yeah.
that's kind of why I walked, really. Just to walk around, meet people, and to just pass on that message that screening really makes a difference. And if you get them the appointment from the doctor, just go. I mean, and I
Yeah.
think now there's actually some technologies that mean you can start. I think it's coming soon that you'll be able to test yourself at home. So, I mean, which will make things a lot easier.
Wow, that would for sure. So in that time, you say you had that long goodbye, the 2 years, and up until the last sort of 2 or 3 months, Melita was really sort of trying to embrace life and make the most of the time that she had. Did you talk about what would happen to you after she died? Was she able to have those conversations about the after for you and the kids, or was it very much focused on her just being here and making the most of it?
Oh no, no, no. She's an amazing woman. She first of all, we all agreed, or she and I agreed, that I would do the most important thing was to hold the family together, to make sure that the kids were okay. And indeed, we've always been a close family, but it's we see each other several times a year, even though they're all adults or young adults and doing their own thing. But I mean, we still meet, I would say, four or 5 times a year together. So I mean, that's good. Secondly, she one day, she kind of reached over and said, Laurence, you should try to find someone else. You need to find someone else. So I thought, oh my, and at first I said something like kind of anodyne, like, there's nobody like I could find like you. And she said, no, you don't understand, Laurence. You need to find somebody else. You need to have a, partner in life. And I thought, wow, what an incredible woman to have, to be thinking like that, to be thinking, kind of beyond. So yeah, and then she had some other things. She was very, very keen on the environment. So she wanted a tree planted in her honor, and she actually spent some time identifying the tree, and that's what we did. We had a big celebration here in the neighborhood. About 100 neighbors and friends came and planted the tree, and here it is 10 years later, and it's a beautiful maple tree. It's just kind of tree that you look at and you smile. So that was kind of how she was. You looked at her. She made you she made you laugh. She was kind of, when she wanted to be, she was bawdy, she was funny. So she was, she's a person who kind of brought life to a group of people, or to anybody really. So, and there's the tree kind of, doing her thing, giving shade and just making a center for the neighborhood. It's great.
I love that. That's beautiful. Bless her. So, how was it for you, Laurence? That obviously, when you know somebody's going to die, you have the anticipatory grief. But from, working with many people that have lost life partners, due to long-term illness, it strikes me that nothing really prepares you for when they die and you find yourself there on your own and they're no longer here. How did you navigate the afterwards, the that 6-12 months of early painful raw grief? Did you have good support around you? What helped, what didn't?
Yeah, I struggled. First of all, Melitta had a lot of friends. So we had this whole thing about, kind of, I don't know what you call it, but circles, and, the circles within circles. So there were, there were neighbors came and made food for us. Living in the house at that stage, my elder daughter was working in New York. My younger daughter was she was in her first year at Manchester, and my son had just come back from college, and so he was living in the house with me. So after all the funeral and everything, there were just the two of us, my son and me, in the house. And so neighbors, they came up with this schedule to give us food, and they did that, and they invited us out. We did a lot of physical stuff. They invited us out on bike rides. My son and I would ride into work. So I would say I kind of like fairly quickly, we got into this routine of doing lots of physical stuff, lots of run. I like running, lots of running, lots of bike riding. And then after a little break, I went back to work, and I kind of lost myself in work. And so these were my two palliatives, but it wasn't that successful, to be honest. Or at least the pain didn't go away very quickly. And then one day, about 6 months later, my colleague at work, she said to me, Laurence, you're snapping at people. You're being a bit, you're being very short with people. You need to just ease off, take things a bit easier, maybe take a few days off. First, what I thought, wow, thank you for having the courage to say that to me. And then, that kind of was like a jolt to me, to kind of start thinking about looking at the situation more positively, not more positively, but looking out more. So I'd been kind of going in, doing exercise and work. And that was the first time when I started to think, well, maybe there's something I can do that would honor Melitta, like by looking out. So we definitely got support from friends and relatives, but it was difficult for 6 to 12 months. It was very difficult. One thing I did was I wrote a diary or a notebook. I wrote to Melitta every night. I did that for about 6 months. So that was a way to I found that quite therapeutic. That was good. Several people recommended I should take therapy. In the end, I decided not to. But maybe I think I probably should have done. So, bottom line is, no easy solutions on that one, Karen. You would know that better than me. Just, but what turned things around was eventually was getting the idea to do something in her honor. To turn this in from the inward pain into something kind of positive and external. But that took about a year to come through.
Yes, because obviously Melitta died, didn't she? She was 53 when she died in September 2015, and it was a year later. You kind of had the idea of doing something, and did you know immediately that it was the walk? Did that come to you quite quickly?
No, no, no. I mean, I knew. The first thing I did was I bought a very small piece of land in England, in Devon. I think there's a scheme run by, is it called Woodlands UK or something like that, where you can buy a piece of land and then it remains like pristine woodland. And as I said, she was very keen on the environment. So I thought, well, that's one little thing that she would have liked. So I did that. But then after a while, in the end, that's just kind of spending a little bit of money. Of course, that's important. And it was important. Now there's a piece of woodland that will remain as is forever. But that wasn't, I kind of had this nagging feeling that wasn't enough. And then there was another few months later that for some reason I was just out walking the dog one day. And this idea of walking around England came into my mind out of nowhere. I mean, it's very strange the way the brain works. I don't know where it came from. Maybe I'd read an article about them doing the England coastal path or something. I'm not sure. But it was like, wow, that's an interesting idea. And I kind of raced home and looked it up on Google, and it looked like it could be done in a year. So then very quickly, I went and asked my boss at work, how do you feel about me taking a year off to walk in honor of my wife? And she almost she started tearing up, and she said, wow, I wish my husband would do that for me. I said, well, you don't want to be in the situation where your husband would want to do it for you. So,
No.
Yeah, and she said, fine, go and talk to HR and we'll work something out. I couldn't believe it. It was like suddenly, life changed. I mean, and there was something to look forward to, something to plan, something to figure out. It was great, actually. I had no idea where the idea came from.
I love that. It just divine intervention almost, just, but why the UK, Laurence? Because obviously you live in Washington DC, you met in South Africa. Why England?
I mean, she grew up in England. She's a very, very English person. If you met her, you'd know she was English. She's very English. I mean, my roots are in England. So yeah, and it's also has a coast path. So if you try to walk in the coast in America, it's impossible. Everything's private. The coastline is privatized in America. It's full of rich people living, and then they block off the access. I mean, in the UK, you're not allowed to do that. So UK is really very, unusual in that, the coast is public access. It's a wonderful thing. But I mean, it was a manageable. I didn't really think about all that stuff. It's just the idea came, and it was just a manageable thing to do in a year. So that was it. And we used to go. We even though we live in Washington DC, we both have family in the UK, so we go back each year. My mum lived in Seaford. I would go and see her. I mean, she's passed away now, but I'd go and see her 2, 3, 4 times a year. So yeah.
Because that's where you started, isn't it?
That's right. I started there because of her, actually. She and my dad had moved to Seaford in the late 70s. They'd lived there ever since. And my dad had passed away earlier, but my mum was still there. So I thought, well, great. I'll start at Seaford. I mean, it's good a place as any. And I know the nice, lovely countryside around there. Started in the site of the Seven Sisters. It's just beautiful. So my mum came down in her wheelchair and waved me off and said something like, what did she say? She said, I'll see you shortly, or don't, the wind is blowing your hair, son, or something like that. Something that just gave the impression, typical mum kind of thing to say, So it was really nice.
Oh, that's so lovely, Laurence. It really is. So you started this in June 2018,
Yeah.
and obviously it had taken a lot of planning. And you connected with a lady called Jo, didn't you, from Cancer Research UK, that helped you kind of put it together and raise money. And did I read in the book she wanted you to carry around a bucket or something on your walk?
She wanted me to carry one of those things, asking people to put coins in the whole walk. I said, sorry, Joe, I'm not doing it. Then she wanted me to have a big flag sticking up out of my backpack, saying cancer. I said, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm happy to. I want to raise money for Cancer Research UK, but I'm not doing those things. So
I mean, the walk's hard enough, but I mean, carrying around a bucket asking for
no, right.
donations, like that's not particularly helpful, is it? I mean, this walk, it just sounds incredible. The way I mean, I can't imagine you've even captured a tenth of what you did and where you walked and the people you met in this book. You were walking for a year. You bought a camper van, didn't you? That I think your daughter had kind of decorated for you to say sort of who you were and what you were doing. But you also stayed in Airbnbs. You had your van, then you walked your distance, then you went back and got your van, right, and drove it to to your finish point, which at the end of a very long walk must have been a bit a bit annoying. But sometimes you slept in it and sometimes you didn't. How did you plan that? Was that
Yeah,
as you
actually,
went?
the van thing was if I was to do something again like that, Karen, I wouldn't do the van. The van was a mistake, kind of an entertaining mistake, but it was a mistake. I thought that when I got to like the wilds of Wales, I wouldn't be able to find anywhere to sleep. And, so that's why I had the van.
Okay.
But actually, in the end, I only slept in the van once in the whole year.
Wow.
And yeah, because to my astonishment and delight, I was able to find places to stay, Airbnbs, all the way around the whole of England and the whole of Wales. It was, sometimes it was a bit of a long walk, but and that was much better than like sitting in the van by myself because I wanted to kind of like share, get the word out. I mean, I'm not the idea of the walk was to, I mean, partly to raise money, but mainly to just get the word out that actually no woman needs to die of cervical cancer now. It's an entirely eradicable disease. I mean, and it's actually incredible that since they started the vaccination in England, which was about 2008, now those young women who they were girls then, but now they're young women, the rate of HPV infection and cervical is like down by 90+%. So, I mean, like there's a whole generation of women now, young women, who will never have to face that. And like all we have to do is just keep that going and then keep the smear tests, people turning up for the smear test. Then we can actually, no woman needs to die of that. So anyway, I wanted to get that story out, and like sitting alone inside the van wasn't a very effective way to do that. So for those two reasons, that the Airbnb and then kind of being sociable about it, I didn't sleep in the van. The one time I did sleep in it is one of those super like irritating things. The bed was like 2 inches too short, and so always stubbing toes in the end of the bed, and then having to keep your knees were kind of pulled up. So super irritating. So after that, I resolved never to do it again. So if I
No.
was to do the whole thing again, I would just have a little car and or rent or buy an old car, and then the idea was just to keep my stuff in a car, in a vehicle. So yeah, I would walk, and then I would go back. Sometimes catch a bus, sometimes catch a train if they were there. If necessary taxi, although that didn't really like doing that, it's a bit expensive. Sometimes people came and walked with me, and then we would leave a vehicle at the other end. So yeah, that's how it went.
I think that's brilliant. And I think as well, we'll come on to some of the stories, but people did. You had friends, didn't you, come fly in from other countries and family. They came and walked certain stretches with you. And you even had we'll come on to Sarah in a bit, but random turned out not so random, but actually, random people they found out about what you were doing and wanted to come and join you because of stories, in their lives, and they did, and you had people come and join you on the walk, and you had some wonderful conversations that way as well, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah. So this was the astonishing thing to me, Karen. And it turned into an incredibly sociable thing. In my mind's eye before, I thought, imagine, standing out there on the lonely crag, man recovering from grief in the howling wind, and, but it wasn't like that at all. I mean, of course, there was some howling wind and there was some rain and so on, but it was super, super sociable. And people came and walked with me probably on about 50% of the days, maybe even slightly more. And then, lots of very sociable evenings with the people in the Airbnbs. So I stayed in Airbnbs, not empty houses, but ones where there was a host. So, and it was great, actually. And I have to say that was what helped me recover in the end. That was what gave me a zest for life again. And it was completely surprising to me. I had no idea that it was going to work out like that. And I think just hearing other people's stories, it puts your own kind of feelings into context. Instead of just focusing on your own grief, you hear other people's tragedies, other people's joys, other people's aspirations, other people's inspirations. And, it was just great, actually.
It was, because the stories that you captured, that you've shared in this book. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? You go on a walk to do what you're doing, and I guess in you sharing your pain, your hurt, that then invites others, doesn't it? It opens up a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
And some of the conversations and some of the stories that people shared with you were incredible, weren't they? And it's that shared lived experiences of different tragedies and circumstances. I think that it connects people, it brings people together, and I think it helps us to see much more so, the richness of life, and actually how fortunate we are to be here still living, but that does come with tragedy and heartache and sorrow for so many, in so many different ways.
I think that's exactly right, Karen. And we live in an age where everybody is kind of showing what great lives they've got on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and then in practice, everyone's got hurt and pain and tragedy in their life. And like you said, I think many people, because I was doing this, they would know before I came, they're doing for this cause, if you like, and then you're sitting in someone's room, or you're on a walk, and you're chatting, and you kind of I think people feel that they can open up, and then just like you say, it goes beyond the conversation just about football or the weather or whatever, into and it's a fleeting intimacy, I would call it. You
Yeah.
Because many times you're not going to see the person again, but you've kind of shared, and people really, I was privy to all sorts of confidences from people that you would never imagine. Mm, a woman worrying about her husband. Was he going to start drinking again? How to keep him busy? What advice did I have could I help him? He needed a bit of more like male company. Could I go and, build his brick wall with him so that he didn't drink? And, he just needed to chat, stuff like that, which you would never imagine that a person would say to a stranger. So there were thousands of instances like that. My conclusion from the year is that actually we're all unusual in our own kind of weird ways. Nobody lives a, in quotes, normal life. And if you can if you get a little bit beneath the surface, it's super interesting, and not just interesting, but inspiring how people deal with tragedy and how they deal with hurt. And that's the human condition. That's what we all face one way or another.
I mean, it must have really opened your eyes to so much, to meet so many people, and have held space for all of their stories. You know, I'm assuming this has given you, and alongside what you've been through, and Melitta's death, and your own journey, and then meeting all these people, you must have a completely different perspective on life now. Do you think this has impacted you in ways you hadn't imagined, sort of beyond the walk?
Well, I mean, the walk certainly meant that I got to a stage where I'd be ready to love again. And I think it hopefully, who knows? I need somebody else to say this. Kind of hopefully made me a more tolerant person, having just listened to so many people's stories. And I think half of it is just listening. Actually, just people just want to share. They don't want, in quotes, advice or anything like that necessarily. They just want to and that sharing is just therapeutic in itself. So hopefully, it's made me more tolerant. And then I think it's just made me like want to participate actively in life, kind of every day, really. So yeah, but I'm not claiming any great philosophical insights or anything like that. I mean, but it definitely gave me a zest for life again. So yeah, it
I
took me
love
out
that.
of focusing inwards on myself. Definitely did that.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, actually, because I think it gives us a perspective that goes beyond ourselves, but also it reconnects us to ourselves. And like you've just said, and like this is what I try and do with my community, is not only help them navigate their grief, but help them to actively participate in life again, because it can very much feel like life's just happening to you, and you're just existing, and you're trying to survive. But actually, it is possible to get to a place. It doesn't seem like it's possible in the early days, but you can get to a place where you want to actively participate in life again, and you find joy and love and peace in your heart, and that lives alongside the grief, and that's such a beautiful thing. Just sort of going back to the walk a little bit, I know you met Jo from Cancer Research UK, and she helped you, but I thought it was such a lovely, again, synchronicity, divine intervention. I don't know, but just how this lady called Sarah, she emailed you, didn't she? Well, I say she used to work somewhere with you, I'm assuming, and heard what you were doing. Her sister had died of cervical cancer, and she wanted to come and join you on the walk, and that kind of had a cascade of events following it, didn't it? Which I think led you maybe a little bit to deciding to write the book.
That's right. It was incredible. It did feel like divine intervention. So we didn't know each other. We both worked for the same organization, but in like different parts of the world. And she heard about the walk through another person, colleague of work. She emailed me, mentioned her sister had died of cervical cancer. She came and she came. We walked together for a couple of days in Devon, and the like on the first morning we were talking for some reason. I know it was in the newspaper that Aberystwyth, the University of Aberystwyth, was the identified by students as one of the best universities to be at in the UK. And I mentioned this, and I said that was kind of funny. Would never have guessed that it would be. I mean, sorry, University of Aberystwyth students, but I would never guess that. And I said, but my late wife went there, and she said, "Oh wow, that's funny. I went there, and she went there." And so I asked, "Did you know Melitta?" She said, "No." I guess she was maybe a couple of years younger. Then we kind of went back to like just looking at the coves out in Devon and just enjoying ourselves. And then she said, "Oh, did you know?" And she mentioned, have you ever heard of a woman? And she gave a name. And I said, "Oh, well, was she one of like four sisters? Because it was an unusual name. It was a Welsh name. It was an unusual name, and I'd heard the name." Um, and she said, "Yeah, she was she was one of four sisters, and from this big Welsh family." And she said that that person was her closest friend from university. And I said, wow, Melitta was friends with a Welsh family with 4 sisters. And she said this other name, Manon. And I said, oh my God, so you were best friends with this girl who his sister was best friends with Melitta. It was incredible. So I was like, out of the 8 billion people, or 4 billion people on the planet, here's one person coming to walk with me whose best friend was Melitta's best friend while they were at university. It was just, I couldn't believe it. Anyway, we walked, and then like about a day later, and she said, oh, well, I'll put you in, let's get together. Let's get the family together. Because I'd never met the family. Melitta had, Melitta and I lived in Africa. We lived abroad. We lived in US. And although she kept in touch with her friend, they met once or twice when Melitta was in the UK, but I never met the family. So anyway, then Sarah and I were talking on other matters, and she said, Laurence, you're not really, you haven't really got your act together on the whole getting the story out thing, have you? She was very blunt, and I said, no, I haven't, and and the reason was because the day we were walking, there was a guy who was swimming around the UK, swimming. I was just walking. This guy was swimming, and all these stories in the newspaper, and it was the same thing. We were sitting there having coffee, and I said, there's this guy swimming, and he's got 200,000 followers on Twitter, and he's in the news. What about me? And I said, I know it's only walking I'm doing, but I need to do a bit better. And Sarah said, yeah, you need to do a bit better, Laurence. Get your act together. And then she pulled out a napkin and she wrote down like 3 or 4 terms of reference for I don't know what you call it, an outreach person, like a media person. And she said, let's send this out onto our, respective connections and see if you can, find somebody and you pay them whatever, £25 an hour or something, and they can just help you. And it was incredible. 4 days later, we had a lady who we did exactly that. I never met her actually until the end of the war. But every time I got to a town, there would be the local radio station or the local newspaper, and they would, I guess not much happens in some of these small towns, and so having some random guy walking in, it was at least just a little bit of news and somebody to do it. And she just organized everything. So she was like an angel. I'm not a great believer in angels, but she was like an angel who arrived with this connection, and then she actually identified the biggest problem with my walk, which was basically that I was enjoying myself too much, walking and then socializing, but I wasn't getting the word out properly. And she solved that. So couldn't believe it. We're in touch to this day. It's just amazing.
I mean, the synchronicities in that are incredible. I mean, like you say, the chances of you meeting Melitta's best friend's sister's best friend on a
Yes,
walk
exactly.
around the UK and having that link. And then I think you went on you did go and meet the family, I think, didn't
Yeah,
you?
we did. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was
And
very
then you got to
emotional.
share stories and you heard more about Melitta that, that they shared with you, which must have been such a gift and a wonderful, I can't even, it just makes me feel all goosebumpy thinking about being able to hear those stories and share those moments. I mean, just how beautiful on its own without everything else. But then obviously leading you on to getting all the media coverage. And this was you were a 1,000 miles in when this was in September 2018. So you'd already been walking for June, you started in June, three months. So like you say, that the chapter Revelations and Serendipity, just beautiful, and all this media kind of coverage. You ended up on the BBC and all sorts, didn't you, with the help of this lady. And I believe it was it at that point that you decided to capture the stories that you were hearing and write the book from grief to love, because you didn't set out to write a book, did you?
I didn't. No, I didn't. Yeah. I think it, the germ of the idea started then with Sarah. But I think it was a bit later on when I heard some other stories that just blew me away. I think that was when I really decided that it was kind of to honor the people that I'd met. because some of the stories were so astonishing. I thought I have to write this down and just get it out. So there was a lady we met, I think in Wales somewhere, who I guess, super sociable. She, what happened, I arrived, it was in winter, it was in December or something. And the first thing I did was I slipped on a step outside her house and just flew through the air and landed on my back with a big thwack. And then, she felt sorry for me and then sat me down, a cup of tea, and then we moved on to wine. And then it became clear that she was like not only super entertaining and interesting, but like super busy. I couldn't quite understand what was going on. The phone kept on ringing. And then I asked her, what do you do? And she said, well, I run my non-profit. I said, tell me a bit about it. And she kind of looked at me as if she was deciding whether to tell me or not. And then she told me her story. She 10, 15 years earlier, she'd been the mom, or she was the mum of two boys. One was 20, the other was 22. The 22-year-old was going for a job interview. And then he called and said he wasn't feeling so great. And then the 20-year-old, his younger brother, went to see him to check he was okay. And then he called his mum and he was screaming into the phone, John has just died. And the hospital the ambulance is coming to take him to the hospital now, but he's just died. And he died of this thing called, I can't pronounce it very well, necrotizing fasciitis, which is basically like a bacteria that moves very fast. He'd had a tooth infection and had gone down into his body and it basically destroyed his inner organs. And he died very quickly, like within 2 days. And so this lady, and then what happened was the younger son got PTSD. Her husband killed himself because of the tragedy of the son. So can you imagine that? She was the only one left standing, this woman of maybe mid-40s at the time. And she grieved, and then she decided she had to do something. And she set up this foundation, which still exists today, in honor of her son. And for the last 15, 20 years, she's been out giving talks to nurses, to schools, about how to recognize the early signs of necrotizing fasciitis. And like you meet this lady, she's just the most normal person, chatting away, friendly, and you would never believe that she had this story behind her, and that's what she's been doing. And I thought, wow, I mean, here am I doing just a 1-year temporary walk and, some people making a big deal of it. This woman has been doing this for 15 to 20 years without, I'm just in a very kind of business-like way and positive. And she totally inspired me, I have to say. So I thought, it was after meeting her that I thought, okay, I need to write down some of these stories. So yeah, that's when it really cemented itself for me.
What a story. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? The stories that people share and God, that like the adversity, the horror really that we as humans endure. And for some people it's unimaginable loss and pain and tragedy and heartache. And you can sometimes, you think about, so you don't even like thinking about it, do you? Like if it were your family and you can't imagine living beyond that, it would feel so awful. And like you say, she was such a bubbly, lovely, warm person, but underneath was so much pain and heartache and sorrow. And just what she's doing, absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. And did you have to ask people if they were happy for you to share their stories?
I did. So I asked her, and what I did was, if I use the proper name, I asked them, would you like me to use your real name, or is it okay? And shall I use a pseudonym? So that's what I did. Whatever the person advised. So,
Wanted,
yeah.
yeah. And then that obviously led you to capture the previous stories and the ones that sort of followed as well, and you decided to put it into to a book, and the way you write, Laurence, is beautiful. I think you joined a writing group or something? I think I read somewhere in here, didn't you? To might have been in the acknowledgements or something, but something to but you seem to have quite a natural flair for writing, because I mean I was engrossed in it. It's a really beautiful
You're very
read.
generous, Karen.
No,
I'll buy
honestly,
you. I'll buy you a glass of wine next time we meet.
I did. I have to say there was a theme in this book. There was a lot of wine and a lot of cake. I,
We're in the
I
pubs,
thought it was
remember?
a lot of pubs. It was a good job you were doing so much walking, as I think you might have rolled out of the UK otherwise.
That's true.
But these are when the stories are shared, right? Like you say, you had a cup of tea, but then that then leads to a glass of wine, and that I think, you know, I'm not saying we should all drink to open up at all, but I think it does naturally just relax people and just, I don't know, opens people up a little bit, doesn't it? You know, just sharing a glass of wine or a beer with someone, it naturally invites in a more intimate conversation. I don't
Yep.
know why, but it does. And I think the fact that, you know, I think you often turned up with a bottle of wine sometimes your Airbnbs, or people would just offer you something at the end. And I think, God, had you done this as a teetotal, I don't know whether you'd have got the same stories.
Would have been the book would have been a lot thinner. That's true.
It really is incredible, and the stories in it are fantastic. And what I love, in the middle there's some pictures as well, so you know you can see some moments and faces of the people that you talk about in here, which is really lovely. And sort of towards the end, um, you've kind of already touched on it, but I kind of wanted to ask you, because you know you'd said about the lessons really that you'd gained from your walk, and the first one was to listen, and you kind of shared that, and I think that's something we're actually not very good at. We listen to respond, we don't always listen to hear, but it sounds like you've kind of honed in your listening skills and really been able to hold that space for people to share what they probably don't share with a lot of people. They're opening up to a stranger in their homes over a bottle of wine, you know, and you've really captured so much in that. Um, and then you
Karen,
kind of said,
let me just interject with one quick thing. Like, you know, Melitta and I were married for 20 something years. Quite often she would say to me, Laurence, I don't need you to give me any solutions. I just need you to listen. So, she was a wise woman, but it took me a long time to actually get that. And then on this walk, I kind of got it. I mean, even the second day of the walk, a guy came and walked with me. We were work colleagues, like different organizations, but we knew each other like in meetings and so on. Came and walked with me. And, you know, we talked a little bit about work stuff. And then he told me about his son who had committed suicide the previous year, like 9 months earlier. And it was just like the pain spilled out, you know, like water spilling out of a drain. And then all he wanted was just to have somebody to say it to. And that was my role, just to listen and to empathize. And, you know, it wasn't there wasn't a conversation necessarily there. It was just a sharing of pain. But I think it was, you know, therapeutic to him as well. So that was definitely one of the early lessons I learned on the walk. There was even one of my hosts even reminded me of that as well.
really?
You know, I don't need you. I don't know. I forget what I was advising on, but she said, I didn't really ask you because I wanted your opinion. I was just, you know, I was just raising it, and now I'll tell you what I think. So, okay.
I love the honesty, but how hard is it? Do you find that hard? Because I think as humans, we're so resourceful. We are hardwired to survive, right? We are out there looking for solutions, to find a way, but we find it so hard to just sit and hold space and listen to somebody. Like we all do. You
Yeah.
know, I do. I think it's because you want to help, you want to fix, you want to find something that's going to make that person feel better. But
Yeah.
it, yes, you're right. There are times when I don't want you to tell me what you think. I don't want you to tell me what I should be doing or how I can do this differently. I just want to offload. I just want to be heard and seen and have this witnessed by somebody. And that's it. That's enough. When you are out in nature and you are walking, it naturally kind of invites in that space of just being able to listen, doesn't it? Whereas when you're sat across from somebody and you're eye to eye and they're telling you something, that it's hard to hold the quiet moments.
I think
So
that's exactly right. Exactly
when
right.
you're walking, you're side by side. And I think, and especially for a man, I don't know, I might be wrong in saying this, Laurence, but I think men find it really hard to open up and share their feelings. So for one man to walk with another man and be outside in nature, and you know, you're looking ahead and not at each other, you're not firing questions at him, it creates that beautiful space. And if you can hold the silence, you're still walking and you have a purpose, which again I think creates that safety in the silence.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I think, for men, for us men, shoulder to shoulder is much better. So then we can, and being outside and walking, doing something physical, it's great. Whether it's walking or running or cycling, all those things help. So definitely, you're spot on, Karen.
And do you still find that you're able to just listen now? Is that a skill that you have? Do you think you developed and you're much more comfortable in not trying to find solutions?
I mean, I can claim that I am much better, but I doubt it, actually, to be honest. maybe I'm more aware that, hang on a moment, now I'm giving advice again. So
Stop.
maybe that, yeah, exactly. That might be the only real difference. So my brain might, identify that I'm misbehaving again, or, talking too much. So, but yeah, I think you need to double check with, my fiance or with my kids, so
I
probably
love
not.
that. I think we can all default into to fixer. It's not a bad thing, but like you say, it's the awareness, isn't it, of kind of going, hang on a minute, you're trying to fix, step back, just listen. So okay, so that was your first lesson, and the second was that you were ready to learn to love again. Now, I have a question for you, and maybe well off here, and you've just sort of alluded to the fact that you're engaged and to remarry. Congratulations, that's lovely.
Thank you, Gareth.
Um, is the lady in question by any chance the librarian that emailed? No way,
Yeah,
really?
yeah. Cheers.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's another one of these like incredible like set of coincidences. So just to kind of back up a bit, there was a local magazine just from here in Bethesda where I live. They decided to run a profile of me because a neighbor, my good friend, their daughter was she was interning at this magazine. And I guess she spoke to the editor and said, oh, I know this guy who's walking around England who lives in Bethesda. Would that be an interesting thing for you guys to? And then so I ran one day on the walk, I got a call from this reporter saying, oh, we're going to do a little we might do a profile on you if you're interesting. So I don't know how to prove I'm interesting, but anyway, so they did this profile, which ran in like November 2018. And then like 4 or 5 months later, there's a librarian in the local library here. She's cleaning up old magazines and she sees the story. And, her own husband, it resonated because her own husband had died of cancer like about 4 or 5 years earlier. And so she asked a friend, she has an English friend who lives here, and she said, do you think I can write to this guy or is that going to be too weird? And the friend said, just do it, and offer to have a beer with him. Well, by the way, they in England in the summer, they drink shandy. So my
Yeah.
lady had never heard of shandy. So she wrote me this email, and which is very kind of tentative, saying, "I hope you don't think I'm a strange woman. Just to email you out of the blue, and et cetera, et cetera. But when you come back to Bethesda, would you like to take a walk and have a shandy?" And so I showed this email, which arrived like 1 week before the end of the walk. I showed this email or talked to my daughter about it, my elder daughter. She was my emotional advisor for the year. And she said, "Dad, it took a lot of courage to write that email. You have to, at the very least, you have to respond and to, honor, just to be respectful of the person who wrote that email. You have to be, that's a big thing to do." And so I did, and we met, and we've been together ever since. So when I came back, it was July 2019. We met like at the end of that month, and then we've been together now for coming up to 6 years. We got engaged a couple of years ago. We're getting married in 2 months' time. So yeah, I could not believe that series of connections. But in the end, if you stand back from that little story, it's one of courage by her. She's the one who reached out. She's the one who, did something that is quite brave, really. So, I mean, me,
Very.
I'm just doing a walk, but she's actually the one who took the step.
Can I ask though? She obviously reached out. It was a big step. Was her intention that she wanted something romantic, or was it initially that
Well,
she just thought your stories resonated and you live locally?
yeah, I mean, I think more the latter.
Yeah.
So yeah, more the latter. Yeah.
That is brave, and for you, like you say, your lesson from this is, that you felt that you could, or you were ready to learn to love again, which is love. And I love that it was with the librarian, because I obviously read that in the book and I was like, oh, why has he put that in there? That's got is that somebody that he went on to have her, and how beautiful. I love it. That's made me really happy because it just sounds so gorgeous. And then finally you said your third lesson was that there was the revelation question. What can we do for those we love? And then you said, now before it is too late, because our lives can change in a moment. What does that mean to you, Laurence? When you think, and I'm sure that's the title of the book, right? From grief to love. It seems like that kind of ties in beautifully there. But what what does that look like for you? What does that mean to you?
The lesson I had learned was that life is unpredictable, that big good things and bad things happen without any warning. So, meeting Melitta out of the blue, it was like a spark of light. It happened very quickly, just out of the blue. And then similarly, when she got the news that she had stage 4 cervical cancer, just happened out of the blue. And then, the email from the librarian out of the blue. So you can't predict these things. So I think the lesson I've learned is to be ready, to be proactive, to connect, to respond, and and to kind of, I mean, it's trite to say it, but I mean, everyone says live in the moment, but kind of actually to do that, instead of waiting to contact that person, just do it. Instead of waiting to and thinking about planning on, I don't know, going on a walk or getting out in nature, just do it. So to me, it's about actually being proactive, engaging, and then being sort of ready and embracing the unexpected. And sometimes the unexpected is good and sometimes it's bad, but just like on the walk, I mean, as a point of contrast, I met some people who hadn't given up on life, but they'd given up on engaging. So I stayed with a guy who just sat in his chair all day long and did the crossword and listened to the radio. And that was his life. And he was perfectly okay guy. But I just thought, I mean, that's one end of the spectrum, and that's the end of the spectrum I don't want to be in. You've got to do things. And every time that you do something different, there's an opportunity for connection. And to me, you mentioned the word several times, synchronicity. Every time there's a connection, you make a connection, you do something, there's a chance that actually it leads to something else. I, right now, my younger daughter is just got put out a job by our friend Mr. Musk, with his Doge cuts everywhere. And, I said to her, like, just engage with people because, the best chance of getting a new job isn't filling in stuff on LinkedIn. It's actually a person who knows somebody who tells you about something and so on. Like, so it's all those little connections you can't predict how they're going to work out. But I think to me, that's the most interesting way to live life, whether it's at a personal level, professional, or whatever. You can't predict everything. So you've got to engage and respond. So sorry, that's a long answer, but
I
that's
love it.
what I meant.
That is a beautiful message, and I think it's so powerful because I think we can make our lives smaller, and we can think that there's nothing else because we can't see what the next thing is. If it's not, right in front of our eyes, we think it's not there, it doesn't exist, it's not possible. But you're so right in just being open to possibilities, to new people, because you never know, just that one thing, that one step, that one choice, that one decision, that one person, it can open up a whole new world and completely take your life in a direction that you had never imagined beyond your wildest dreams. And to just be open to that, and give yourself permission as well to get out there and live your life. And I know that's not easy, especially when you've lost your person, your safe person, the person that you love in life. It's hard. I know it's hard, but it's possible, I think, is the point. And we have to work through our grief and find our feet in the world again. And that's not an easy journey, much like I'm sure walking around England for a year is. As much as this book is a beautiful read and there are many beautiful moments shared, and just reading it is wonderful, but I'm sure that as well there were difficulties, and you do allude to some difficult days and bad weather and feeling a bit beaten by it all and tired, and it, it kind of represents life and grief and all that kind of stuff, doesn't it? um it's just incredible. Can I just, before we finish, Laurence, in terms of your mission with cervical cancer and wanting to raise money, there was a lovely sort of, again, synchronicity at the end, I think, wasn't there, in that something had sort of come to light as you finished, and I think they'd rolled out the vaccine, hadn't they, into schools. And you'd realised quite a lot of work had been going on behind the scenes, and it was really sort of coming to life, and the money that you'd raised had really sort of helped and gone towards that, and had made a difference.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think last year the NHS announced a target of eliminating cervical cancer in England by 2040. So that's very cool. I mean, that's just, that's 15 years. That's only 15 years away. I mean, that's just amazing. And England's one of the early countries to do that. I think Australia's done it. Australia is a bit ahead of England because they did the vaccine a little earlier. But I mean, I think this is a great example of England, kind of leading the way for other countries in the world. So it's perfectly possible. It's working. Like, isn't it incredible to think that our children's children will no longer have to face this scourge? I mean, it's just great. So I kind of felt that, my little thing is sort of on the right side of history, if you like. I mean, I can't claim to have made a big difference, although, I did make a difference to some individuals.
Yeah.
I got lots of little email. One of the ladies I stayed with said, she held up a piece of paper as I walked in the door and said, "You made me go to this to my screening test." I said,
Brilliant.
"Well, that's great. That's why I'm walking." So,
That's
but
what you want.
yeah,
That's what you
exactly.
want. It
All
is. And
we can do is just at our own little level. So.
the HPV vaccine is now offered, isn't it, in schools, and all sort of girls get it. I think they're trying to get it to boys as well, aren't they? Because it's
They're offering it to boys as well. I think
boys as well now.
they made that change like 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. Laurence, you are An absolute delight. You really are such a warm, kind-hearted soul. It's such an honor and a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for writing this beautiful book, From Grief to Love, Walking Around England and Wales, written by Laurence Carter. It's available on Amazon. Thank you for bringing this into our lives. It's been really special, actually, to feel like, I've been able to share a bit of this with you and hear, more about Melitta. Again, just sounds like just such a wonderful woman. And, I'm thrilled that you are going on to get married, and it worked out so beautifully with the librarian. And, I'm sure you continue to bring so much joy into people's lives. So thank you for this lovely conversation, for this book, and for all that you have done as well, raising awareness. Laurence, it's been a real honor. Thank you.
Karen, thank you very much for having me on. I owe you a glass of wine. I look forward to sharing that.
Just a glass. They've got bottles, Laurence. Bless you. Thank you so much, Laurence. Thank you so much for listening to the Widow Podcast with me, Karen Sutton. If you would like more support, head to karensutton.co.uk or explore the many other episodes for more conversations and support. You can do so much to help you take steps forward towards a brighter future, and I'd love to help you do that.